So working parents in Ottawa are left wondering if their child's school will be closed after the closure of schools west of the capital region in Toronto and Peel. Now, if schools are closed next week after the spring break is up, are the workplace rights, what are they? And what will employers be willing to accommodate? A lot of questions, a lot of parents wondering this morning. Here with the answers, Alex Lucifero, partner at Samfiru Tumarkin LLP. Alex, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Annette.
Yeah, a lot of parents wondering, okay, the kids are at home this week for spring break. There are indications that next week they may not be going back in Ottawa. We're going to find that out from Dr. Etches by Wednesday. So the parents need to know, do they have any rights when it comes to having to stay home with their kids if they don't have childcare?
Yes, it does look like that's the way it's going, Annette. And as a father of young children myself, I'm expecting the children to stay home after the spring break. The good news, I guess, for working parents is that actually our laws are quite favorable to employees in these kinds of situations. What I mean by that is employers do have the obligation to accommodate employees on the basis of family status. And what that means is if a parent is unable to secure childcare and has to stay home to care for their young children while they're remote learning, while they're going to school from home, then an employer has to allow the working parent, to do so. They cannot punish that employee simply because they have to care for their children.
Now, does that mean, when you say unable to get childcare, when you think of it, we're not supposed to be associating with people outside of our bubble. So presuming then you shouldn't be getting grandma and grandpa to watch the kids or a babysitter because that extends the bubble according to what public health is recommending. So then let me ask this then, does that then in effect make it so that employers would have to accommodate parents to work at home, or just give them the time, I guess, off, if you will, to not be working and instead caring for their children? Because the children would still be remote learning, parents supervising them in that regard.
Yes, that's generally correct, and in the sense that if you're able to work from home as a working parent, then certainly your employer should be accommodating you in that way. Now, if your work, for example, you work in a manufacturing plant or a factory, etc., and you simply can't work from home, then your employer still has to accommodate you. Again, I want to remind all our viewers out there, you cannot be punished in your employment simply because you have to care for your children because they're effectively being forced to be home. So your employer can therefore allow you some time off. There might be some benefits there in the form of the Canada Recovery Benefit that an employee can access financially. An employer doesn't necessarily have to pay you to allow you to accommodate you and allow you to stay home. But again, they do have to accommodate you and allow you to care for your children. Generally speaking, accommodation is a two-way street. And so as a parent in this kind of situation, you should make some efforts to find alternate childcare. But you very correctly pointed out that, given our stay-at-home order, given the fact that we are being asked to really isolate within members of our own household, it's going to be almost impossible, if not impossible, for parents to actually find childcare during these next few weeks and months, potentially.
So that would lead me to believe then that the chances of being fired are pretty slim.
They certainly should be. Again, no employer should be punishing a parent, Annette, simply because they have to care for their children who are home and not able to go to school. If an employer does take that kind of action, and it doesn't even have to be being fired or terminated, it could be any form of punishment or retribution, that is a violation of the Human Rights Code in Ontario. It could potentially lead to a termination and an employer owing an employee severance pay and potentially additional damages as well.
Is there any time limit to this? What if the kids, this is a big what if, but what if they don't go back at all for the rest of the school year? We're talking 2 months here. And if parents have to be at home to take care of them, that's a long time to be away from your job.
You're absolutely right. We were faced with this situation, last year, and our employment laws haven't really changed despite COVID. We're still in this situation where, you're absolutely right. Employers do have to accommodate parents in these kinds of situations, regardless of how long it may be. If that obligation to care for your children remains, an employer has to accommodate. This should be, a conversation between an employer and an employee. We're seeing lots of employers manage solutions, figure out, problem solve these kinds of situations that hopefully will ultimately benefit both the employee and the employer. Unfortunately, it is the case that disputes will happen, but hopefully for the most part, we can find solutions and find our way out of this mess.
I think it's worth reiterating something you pointed out earlier, that they have to accommodate you under the family status, but not necessarily pay you. So you would not necessarily lose your job. You can be allowed to stay home to care for your children, but you might not get a paycheck. Is that right?
That's correct. So an employer does have a legal, and it's a very strict legal duty to accommodate an employee in this situation, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily have to pay an employee that has to take time off to care for the children. So I'm not talking about working from home. If you're working from home, of course you have the right to be paid for the work that you do. But if you actually have to take a leave effectively to care for your children because you're simply not able to work from home because of the nature of your job, then an employer doesn't have the obligation to pay you for that time off. Again, that employee may have access to other benefits, formerly the CERB, but what might be, I think it's the Canada Recovery Benefit, if I'm not mistaken.
Can they force you to use your vacation days or sick days?
The employers can potentially, yeah, and it might not be a bad idea for an employee to actually use some of their vacation. If they do have to take time off, that might be an option, yes.
All right, great information as always. Alex Lucifero, partner at Samfiru Tumarkin LLP. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Annette.